Hello and welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Death. I'm Kiri Meyer.
And I'm Andy McNeil.
And we are thrilled to be your hosts for these conversations. Let's Talk Death is brought to you by Heal Grief. We are a social support network creating a community after a loved one has died. So everything that we do is inspired by our core belief that no one should ever grieve alone.
Our goal with this program is to just have a friendly chat with the field's leaders so we can help normalize and educate our Heal Grief community. We're pleased to welcome to this episode Paul Malley to our show. Paul is the president of Aging with Dignity. After 17 years, Paul remains committed to the work of Aging with Dignity because it addresses what he believes is likely the biggest challenge of our generation. He has seen firsthand how easy it can be for elders to become lost in the shuffle and how meaningful it is when their dignity is acknowledged by someone as simple as holding a hand. Through Paul and his team's work at Aging with Dignity, they help provide the information, resources, and advocacy to help make dignified care a reality for all.
So welcome, Paul. We are so glad that you're here with us today.
Thanks, Kiri, and Andy, good to be with you both.
So I love that your bio really shows the compassion around everything you do. Would you be willing to start off by telling us a little bit about Five Wishes and the mission behind it?
Sure. So as you mentioned, Five Wishes is a program of Aging with Dignity. It's a national nonprofit organization. Our founder, Jim Toohey, worked directly and closely with Mother Teresa of Calcutta. And that was really the inspiration for Five Wishes, and his creating Five Wishes was in his time and experience in working in missions in India and in Mexico and in Washington, D.C., and living in a home for patients with AIDS. He saw there how there was this human connection. Doesn't matter what part of the globe we're in, what type of socioeconomic status we're in, we all have some same desires. To love, to be loved, to be accompanied. And that's why he created Five Wishes. And the program grew in ways that we really had no idea or could never have planned for. So now it's helped more than 35 million people all over the country, young and old, plan for what kind of care they want in case of a serious illness. And it's been really, really great to see.
You know, what's interesting is when I hear those types of statistics on how people respond to something, it tells us it was a need. Right. There was a need there. He saw the need and put it out there, and people responded to that. I wonder if you could share a little bit about that, like why is what you do important to the public and for people to understand, and how can they utilize that in their lives?
Sure. So Five Wishes, technically and legally, it's an advance directive. Sometimes some people call it a living will, but that idea has been around for a couple of decades. The problem was most people didn't use one, any type of document, their state document or anything else. And what you said, Andy, is exactly right. Five Wishes struck a chord, it hit a need. And the reason is that when we created Five Wishes, we looked at the national research on what people said was most important to them if they were living with a serious illness or near the end of life or caring for a family member. And they said things like, I want to be at home if that's possible. I don't want to be in pain. I want to be comfortable. I want my spiritual needs to be addressed. I want my family to know that I love them or forgive them. And our idea was, well, if those are the things that are important to people, let's combine that with the legal questions and the medical questions into one simple resource that people could use. And so then it was described as the living will with a heart and soul. And that was the headline, the very first headline about Five Wishes. And then families from all over the country started asking for it. And I think it was just because of what you said, Andy. It hit a nerve, it hit the chord of what people were looking for. And it started with families, and then it grew to healthcare providers, doctors' offices, health systems, places of worship, colleges and universities, really organically.
Yeah.
So quick question for you, Paul. You were talking about the heart and the soul of all of this. I know I have an advanced care directive that I filled out for 5 Wishes, and I did it years ago. But can you talk about the different formats you have? Because I think people will be interested to know that it's not just for adults.
Sure, that's right. And you're exactly right, Kiri. Advanced care planning of any sort, but in particular with 5 Wishes, is for everybody. Certainly on the legal documents like 5 Wishes for all adults 18 and over. Our idea with 5 Wishes was, let's translate the medical and the legal jargon at first into everyday English. That was our first thought. Make it understandable for people. Now we have it available in 29 different languages. So if families have part of their generation, the grandparents that speak Chinese or Arabic or Hebrew or Gujarati, they can use that translation of 5 Wishes to talk about with their family members and then communicate with their doctors and healthcare providers. And Kiri, you're right, as you mentioned, we also have a version called Voicing My Choices for adolescents and young adults. We were really grateful to work with the NIH, National Institutes of Health, that did research using 5 Wishes with with a population age group 16 to 28 years old. They asked them to look at 5 Wishes and make some suggestions on how to create a resource that would be appropriate for young adults. And the result is a document called Voicing My Choices. And we even have a document for very young children called My Wishes for seriously ill children, just to be able to communicate to their parents and their doctors, here's what's important to me, here's what makes me feel safe and comfortable if I'm in a healthcare setting. And it really lets, in those cases, the child who's seriously ill take the lead in saying, here's what's important to me, here's what I want you to know, here's how we can talk about these things together.
Right. So we mentioned the legal aspect of the document, and I think some people who are listening in would want to know a little bit about, like, is it legal and binding in my state? How does that work? Can you talk a little bit about just sort of the legal pieces to it for a minute?
Sure. So when we introduced 5 Wishes nationally, we were grateful to start a relationship with the American Bar Association. And we have a legal consultant who's the director of the ABA's Commission on Law and Aging. And they help us to look at the laws of all 50 states. So we've created 5 Wishes, the one 5 Wishes document that today meets the legal requirements in 42 states. So use 5 Wishes, you can have the peace of mind to know that it meets the legal requirements in all the states that are listed on the document or on our website at 5wishes.org. Today, there are still 8 states that have what we call mandatory form requirements. So what that means is if you live in one of those 8 states, then you have a step 2 to take, and that step 2 is to fill out your state form in addition to 5 Wishes.
I see.
So in the majority of states, 5 Wishes covers all of the legal requirements for both a durable power of attorney for healthcare and a living will regarding medical treatment. And then in those other 8 states, you can still use 5 Wishes, but take that second step of filling out your state legal form also.
I see. Wow. Well, I mean, that's great that it looks like the majority of states.
That's right.
The one-step process, but that it still is accessible to people.
Right. And the nice thing there, especially for families, if they're coming together, how many of our families, everybody lives in one state, right? Between 3 generations. So if you come together during the holidays or on vacation, or even, through a Zoom family conference call, right, you can all be talking from the same source rather than, grandma having a Pennsylvania document and your parents having a Florida document. You can all come together around a common message and a common resource with 5 Wishes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Paul, one thing I think I'm stuck on, which is a good thing, is, the heart and soul aspect of this. And I think I always find it interesting to really find why people do what they do. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about why this is so important to you and why you're so passionate about this.
Sure. Yeah. For me personally, although I've been working at Aging with Dignity for 20 years, I think my connection to the mission of Aging with Dignity started when I was a really young child. I was 7 or 8 years old when I was with my grandfather during a serious illness of his. And I was actually sitting on his bedside, at his bed, when he died. And it was because a nurse made an exception to a rule that would allow me to sneak up the back stairwell because I was too young to get up into the ICU unit at the time. But she allowed me to get up there, and I sat on his bed for a few hours holding his hand, and he was still able to talk with me, and I helped him to drink a little bit, and he had a smile on his face. And I look back on that now and I think, you know, as an 8-year-old child, I had no idea what I could or should do in that instance, right? I didn't know what to do to fix anything. I couldn't talk to doctors or nurses, but I could sit there and I knew that it made my grandfather really happy. And so that made me happy.
Yeah.
And then as I got older and during my college years, actually the other 3 of my 4 grandparents all passed away during my undergrad years in college.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for some of them, I saw how it was really difficult, you know, being transferred from between nursing home and hospital, and kind of loss of little bits of dignity along the way, of independence and dignity, and how a simple response from family, like a grandchild or from my parents, like bringing my grandmother's favorite food into the nursing home and sitting down with her and having lunch with her. And then eventually, when my grandmother couldn't get up out of bed, the one thing that I remember that I could always do is when I would walk in, my grandmother, for as long as I can remember, always had hot feet. So here's what I mean by that. She never wanted to have her feet bundled up. When she was in bed, she always wanted to have her toes sticking out the edge of the blanket. And nurses would always be well-meaning, but they bundle her feet and wrap them in blankets. And I would always walk in, and before I'd even give her a hug, I'd kind of let her toes out of the end of the blanket so that her feet could breathe and she'd get a smile on her face.
Yeah.
You know, it's little things like that that sound so simple, but that anybody can do. We don't have to be experts. We don't have to be trained.
Right.
We just have to know what's important to our loved ones. And so that's why my heart attached to this mission of 5 Wishes, because that's what it's all about, not just naming healthcare agents and giving medical treatment instructions, but it's saying, here's what's important to me. Here's what helps me to be comfortable. When you want to show me that you love me, here's what you can do for me. And it's just being present. It's holding a hand. It's praying. It's saying, I love you. It's untucking your toes, if that's what you want.
Yeah. No, I love that. You're right. There's so many things that are never communicated. And maybe because a lot of people don't have a context for that. And I think it's important how 5 Wishes can give people a context to communicate these important things. And like you say, it could be very simple things. So
that's right. And that's what it turns out to be for a lot of people. We've heard the comments back that 5 Wishes turned into an instruction book of what good care meant for my grandparent or for, you know, whoever the family member is. And I, as being a parent now myself of young children, that's a common refrain where parents say, I wish they came with a book of instructions. And sometimes family caregivers will say the same thing. They'll think, I want to be the best son or daughter or grandson that I can be, but I've never been in this situation before. I don't know what to do. So 5 Wishes really turns into that practical instruction book for what it means to be a good caregiver, for what it means to take good care of your family. And, you know, the growth of 5 Wishes now having touched the lives of 35 million people, the only reason that happened was because individuals took this up as a personal charge. You know, they felt empowered to be able to bring 5 Wishes into their family or into their Rotary Club or their workplace or their college and say, this is something that's important. Y'all should take a look at this. And that's part of how 5 Wishes is growing. And in some cases, that's how some families have responded to their grief, having lost a loved one. If they use 5 Wishes and it went really well, we've heard of instances where they give out 5 Wishes as part of the memorial service and say, this was so important to our family that we want to give it as a gift to everyone who has come to remember our loved one.
Wow.
The other side of that, sometimes things don't go well near the end of life, and there are regrets or there are family disagreements or brokenness. And sometimes people in those situations pick up 5 Wishes and they say, I'm going to make this better for another family so that they don't have to go through the hard times and the brokenness that we did. So they're empowered to take 5 Wishes because they've seen how bad it can be without something like 5 wishes. If decisions aren't made and family members are left to guess and they disagree, there's some really awful stories out there, and most people know of some of those. So
Yeah.
you can turn that into a positive action by going forth and giving out 5 wishes and kind of bringing some good from the situation.
So we have about 5 minutes left, and you've already sort of transitioned us a little bit, just about how 5 wishes can be used. But I am curious if there's someone listening and they just want to delve further and look into, look at your advanced care directive, 5 wishes. Where would they go? Where would you direct them? How do they reach out and connect with you there?
Sure. So the first stop would be checking out our website. It's 5wishes.org. And there you'll find information about how to get 5 wishes for yourself. And I'd say start with yourself first. So get 5 wishes, go through it, fill it out. One of the best ways to approach even family members about 5 wishes is not to put somebody else in the hot seat, not to bring it to your grandparents or to your spouse or anybody else and say, I heard about 5 wishes and I thought of you. But you can say, I heard about 5 wishes and I see how helpful it is. And so I filled it out for myself. Let me tell you what's important to me in case you ever have to make decisions for me on my behalf. And then let's talk about it together. So that's a bit of a softer entry. That's a good way to start a conversation with a family member. And then I think the biggest thing is there's often a reluctance for people of thinking, well, maybe I'm not the right person to bring this up in my family, or maybe I'm too young, or maybe I'm too old, or maybe I'm too healthy. And I think the answer is, if you're hearing this message, if you're thinking about it, you are the one. You're the one to carry this message to your family or to your workplace, because it can start with you. So if you fill out 5 wishes for yourself first, then talk about it with your immediate circle, your family and people who would be involved in decision making for you in case you're seriously ill. And then think about who would you be involved with as a caregiver if they become sick: your parents, your grandparents, your very good friends, your siblings, your close friends. And then after that, then think about, so if our family has benefited from this, who else would benefit? And that's where we hear these just incredible community stories of community outreach in workplaces, in colleges, in places of worship, you name it. A barbecue restaurant in Texas gives out 5 wishes to all of its employees. Wow. And MTV and large corporations and small. So that's how this spreads. So I just give that invitation to you. If you think this sounds interesting, take a look at it. Start for yourself and then think, what more can you do? Because it's through people who have done that this program has touched 35 million lives, and we're still just a small grassroots organization. So we're grateful to work with all of you to do that. And the website is 5wishes.org to get more info.
Great.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Paul. I must say really quickly, I was 20 years old when I found out about 5 wishes. Filled out my own and had a really awesome conversation with my family as I brought up my own up to the surface, and then they all did it as well. So, this is not just you saying this. This is actually, this is how it went for me too. So we just want to thank you once again for being here as our guest on Let's Talk Death and for sharing so much with us. We're so appreciative to have you.
Thanks, Carrie. That's a perfect example. You were leading the way and you didn't even know about it. Thanks, Carrie. Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, no, thank you, Paul. And we want to say to our viewers, if you would like to learn more about Heal Grief, please visit healgrief.org.
Let's Talk Death episodes will air monthly, so make sure that you sign up on healgrief.org to receive our newsletter for next month's link.
And with that, we want to thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time on Let's Talk Death.